So before we talk about the specific edition, one of the things that we were talking about together before we started rolling the cameras is the idea that I think a lot of people don't understand how behavior analytic journals work, who funds them or controls information, how people get in or don't get in. So if you don't mind painting kind of like a pretty broad strokes on like, what is this process? Because we know that we have 50% of behavior analysts have been certified for less than 5 years. Chances are most of them have not published yet, unless they perhaps had a thesis or dissertation published. And so I think this seems to be this like mysterious process that's only reserved for very special people.
For sort of an elite class or something.
Right, and so I'd like to kind of like be honest about like what it is, and then also, frankly, get your feedback on where we need to go.
Yeah, sure. So first, let's start with like the general sort of acknowledgement that if you haven't been part of a group or moved within a particular group or culture, you're not very familiar with whatever that group is. So if that group is the sort of publication process, of course, why would you be familiar if you haven't engaged that process? But the same is true of the sort of ivory tower researchers. They're also not so familiar with the practitioner world if they haven't been engaging in that world too, and the social justice world if they haven't been engaging in that world. So it's not really a surprise that the majority of folks aren't super familiar with the publication process, because the majority of folks in behavior analysis haven't engaged that process. And that makes sense, and that's true not just of behavior analysis, but that's true of psychology, social work, most helping professions. Most of the people doing the helping aren't publishing research on doing the helping. And part of that is just a matter of like allocation of time. Like, let's just be honest, when we have a BCBA and we're helping families, kids with autism or whatever our job is, how much of our week do we have set aside for research? If there's a whole wait list of other folks who need our help, are we gonna say, no, sorry, I gotta work on my research paper? Like, I see that you're suffering, but I don't have time, I'm gonna work on my research paper. If you're a full-time practitioner, there just literally isn't the time in the day, right? So it makes sense that there's this sort of divide. So basically, here's how it works. Most people, or at least a lot of people, think that there's a puppet master behind the scenes. They think that there's organization where there isn't. And by the way, that's a very human trait. That's a very human activity, is we look at a random mess of stimuli and we try to detect patterns where there aren't any. That's common, we all do that, right? And so that's sort of how rumor and gossip get generated. We don't really know what's going on, so we create something that must be going on, right? Well, that's really common with the publication process. People have very strong opinions that they share on Facebook especially about the publication process that when they're not informed by familiarity with the process, they come up with all kinds of patterns of who must be in charge and stuff like that. So here's the basic deal. It's way less organized than you think. Like, there isn't anyone like, pulling the strings behind the scenes. And the reason for that is because science is about protecting science from the influence of any one individual person or corporation, so that individual people or interests shouldn't actually have very much influence. So even as an editor of a journal, I actually don't have that much control over what gets published in the journal. Ultimately, it's my editorial responsibility what gets published, but I'm not handpicking things. I'm not handpicking people. That's really not part of the process, And so a lot of people think, for example, you need to have a PhD to submit a manuscript to a journal. Totally false. That's never been the case. It's not the case. People think like you have to maybe have published before or been a co-author on a study before you can submit your own study. Totally false. It's not the case. It's never been the case. People think maybe you have to be affiliated with a university in order to submit an article for publication. Not true at all. So basically the way it works is you just have to send it in. There aren't any qualifications, or there's no degree that you need to have, nothing like that. You need to send the manuscript in. You need to submit it.
This is just a peek at the over 4.5 hours of content that we're releasing. Hour and a half of that sitting down with Jonathan Tarbox, but we also have Marlesha Bell, Caio Miguel, Meg Heinicke, Amber Valentino, Courtney Tarbox, Fahmie included, and some special, very special guests. We have just a fantastic group to talk about not only how the publication process works, some current innovations and what's going on in academia and the research practice, synergy and gap, like people working together on closing those in.
Hey everybody, welcome to season 2 of On the
We owe a big thank you to our season 2 participants. This is the 3rd out of 4 releases of the content. So we have This Way of Being, which is looking at valuing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then we have This Way of Doing, which is this research practice deep dive. And then we also have What About Parents that was released last week. What About Parents is free, check it out. It's made some serious splashes in the autism community with some fantastic people that we unfortunately lost last week. With This Way of Practicing releasing here very soon. Appreciate you all. More content coming tomorrow on this channel, so stick around and I will see you in the next one. That's your Daily EA.